When Leah arrived at Pamela's adobe home, her friend was already dressed, keys in hand, with a neatly stacked bundle of papers by the door. "We're heading out," Pamela said without preamble. "To where?" Leah asked, setting her bag on the bench. "The copy shop on Guadalupe. I want 2 working copies of the Codex, something we can annotate without hesitation. The original stays untouched, just in case." "Smart," Leah said. Lucas spun in eager circles by the door, his tail slicing the air. "You little rascal," Pamela chuckled, bending to clip on his leash. She glanced at Peanut, who was already bouncing in anticipation. "And I suppose you're coming too?" Leah smiled and fastened Peanut's harness with a practiced tug. "Looks like it's a family outing." The cold morning air greeted them as they stepped outside. The dogs trotted ahead down the flagstone path, noses twitching, sunlight casting long slats across the sidewalk. 15 minutes later, the scent of toner and paper greeted them as they stepped into the narrow print shop. A soft whirring sound came from the back as machines worked through earlier jobs. Behind the counter, a woman in a turquoise cardigan looked up and smiled warmly. "How can I help you?" Pamela pushed a stack of papers toward her. "2 full sets, collated, but leave them loose." "It'll take about 30 minutes or so. I have 2 orders ahead of you." "No problem," Pamela said. "We'll take the dogs for a walk while you run them." Outside, Lucas and Peanut trotted ahead toward Cathedral Park, tails wagging in the breeze. When they returned to the shop, the clerk looked sheepish. "I accidentally hit 3 instead of 2, she said, glancing apologetically at the screen. "Third copy is on the house." While the clerk rang up the sale, Pamela turned to Leah. "I'll have Joe put the extra copy in his fireproof safe." "Probably a good idea," Leah said. Pamela paid with her credit card, and they left with the original and 3 identical sets. Leah sat cross-legged on the wool rug beneath the tall study window, her laptop propped atop a stack of books. Josephus, Tacitus, Philo. The air smelled of pinyon smoke and worn paper. Sunlight spilled across the oak table where Pamela sat surrounded by reference texts, printouts, and handwritten notes. "You were doing this long before I showed up," Leah said, eyes on her screen. "These cross-references between Suetonius and Acts, did you already know this before Rome?" Pamela looked up from a spiral-bound copy of her manuscript. "I had suspicions. But walking those alleys, standing at the baker's tomb, it changed everything." Leah's fingers paused over the keyboard. "It's strange, isn't it? We're writing history backwards, through buried trails and forgotten names." Pamela gave a soft laugh. "That's how the truth survives, hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone to notice." Before Leah could respond, Pamela's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, expecting another email or reminder. Instead, her hand froze. A Vatican seal. A secured channel. Leah noticed the shift in her expression. "What is it?" Pamela's voice was barely audible. "A message. From Rome." Leah rose and moved closer, reading over her shoulder. "The Holy Father will arrive at the Santa Fe Airport on January 18th, 2025. He requests your presence on board the plane at 9 a.m. for a brief private conversation. He will not disembark." Leah sat down slowly. "Any idea why he's coming?" Pamela shook her head. "No." They sat in silence. The fire crackled softly on the hearth. A crow called outside, sharp against the fading light. Finally, Pamela stood. "Whatever it is, he wants us to know it before someone makes it disappear forever." Chapter 4: The Pope's Final Gift. Santa Fe Airport, January 18th, 2025. The ramp extended like a tongue from the open mouth of the sleek white jet parked alone near a maintenance hangar, shielded from public view. A pair of discreet Vatican guards greeted them with nods, their presence more symbolic than official. Inside, the cabin glowed with a soft gold light. Leah touched Pamela's elbow as they entered, her eyes scanning the unfamiliar luxury. Ivory leather, polished wood, linen, folded just so. And at the back, sitting at a narrow table with a linen runner and a single silver cross, was the Pope. He rose. "Pamela, Leah, my dear sisters." They embraced. It was quiet, human, without pageantry. He was just a weary soul who had witnessed too much of the world and knew his time on earth was limited. Leah took the seat beside Pamela. Pope motioned for tea, which was brought by a single attendant, then dismissed with a gentle wave. He folded his hands. "I apologize," he began, "for the secrecy. I imagine you have questions." Pamela nodded. "Only one that matters. Why are we here?" The Pope's smile faded. He reached into a leather suitcase beside him and withdrew a bundle, wrapped in linen and bound with crimson cord. "This," he said softly, "is a translation of the codex recovered last year. I commissioned it to be copied, because I fear the original may not survive what comes next." Leah leaned forward. "What do you mean?" He looked at them both, eyes sharp despite the lines of age. "It is the codex Philo held, a record, her journal, not only of events, but of how those events were written, so that truth could be carried forward by those willing to risk everything to remember." Pamela's breath caught. "You mean—" "It is not written in enigmas," he said. "This version is plain, literal. It names names. It traces the line of Jesus and the Magdalene, from Ansar and Kesar through Abraham and Sarah, Baal and Asherah, then onward to Gamaliel and Philo, through the schools of Alexandria and Jerusalem. It explains how their truth was buried by design under the theology of Shammai's heirs, how Paul forged a God of wrath to replace a teacher of compassion. Your own work, Pamela, has unknowingly reconstructed the same trail Philo once feared would vanish." Leah blinked. "You're giving this to us?" "I'm entrusting it to you," he corrected gently. "The original I have placed in the care of the man I believe should succeed me, but I cannot guarantee he will, or that he will have the courage to face the consequences of what this text reveals." He paused, then added, "You, on the other hand, have already proved you're willing to face those consequences." Pamela didn't speak. Her fingers closed around the bundle. It was heavier than she expected. She thought of the parchment fragments she'd once puzzled over in quiet frustration. She never imagined the full story would arrive wrapped in linen and placed in her hand by a dying pope. The pope continued, "This codex tells the story of telling the story, how it had to be hidden in plain sight, passed from scribe to scribe in underground grottos and desert sanctuaries. But it also hopes for a time when it would be read again, without fear." He looked out the window toward the Sangre de Cristo mountains, barely visible in the winter haze. "When Francis of Assisi arrived, he honored the poor, the sick, and the forgotten, but he also honored the feminine, quietly, carefully for his safety. He was a Nazarene by heart and by blood." Leah's voice was a whisper. "Giulio Claudian?" The Pope nodded once, but he knew better than to say so. He turned back to Pamela, his voice now full with sorrow and hope. "This is not just a history. It is a legacy, and it must be written, so that when the time comes the Church will be forced, not persuaded, forced to reveal the truth that is hidden. It's better this way, for everyone." He stood. Pamela and Leah followed. No more words were needed. He placed both hands over the bundle now resting in Pamela's arms. "Go carefully, and watch out for one another. I've tried to keep this meeting secret, but secrets have a way of finding a curious ear." He placed his hand on each of their shoulders. "Pax Omolux, dear daughters." The cabin door opened once more, and with it came the weight of the world.